Hey everybody. In the past I've done diagnostic work on my Camaro using the scan tool, and you've seen some videos that I've made with using my Actron OBD1 scan tool to do diagnostics on the Camaro and how you could use it for other cars. And I've collected some data and I've presented that data, and so if you go back and look at the other videos I've posted, you can see how that works. One of the things that I always wanted to get into, and I've had some comments on the channel regarding that, is there's a way to use your laptop, use a laptop computer and into the ECM and pull data. And so I decided it was time to do that, and that's what today's all about. I went to a place that I found online called OBD Diagnostics, and I even went sort of deluxe. They offer several options, and the first one was just to get a simple OBD1 cable. And as I looked at it and I looked at what the choices were, I kind of wanted to try to do this with OBD2 also. So I bought, I forget what they call it exactly, but I'm going to call it, they've got their deluxe kit. And rather than going back and buying things a couple of times. So what I got in this kit was, well, first of all, they give you a CD as part of the kit that has software on it. And if you want to buy the kit with a flash drive, you can pay them a little extra and they'll supply it on a flash drive. I've got plenty of CD drives, so I took a spare flash drive and I've converted the software and put it all on a stick so that I can put it into this laptop easier, which my latest laptop doesn't have an optical drive. But anyway, the main thing that I wanted to have was, this is an OBD1 cable that goes to a USB port, and this one has the jumper on the end of it. We've talked in the past that my scan tool and my ECM, it goes straight into what they call 10K mode. There's a 10,000 ohm or 10K resistor that tells the ECM it's time to send data. This cable has the jumper in it. It has a 10K resistor in it. And so what you're supposed to be able to do is put the jumper in so that it sees the 10K resistor, telling the ECM to send data, and then once you have that connection established, you can move this jumper and remove the 10K resistor and get it out of what they call 10K mode. When you're in that mode with the 10K resistor, it raises the idle speed, it changes the ignition timing, it does a number of things, which is good for certain kinds of diagnostics, but it also masks other things that you might want to see. So this is a nice feature. And again, I bought the USB kind of cable so I can plug straight into USB. And this is the GM standard ALDL connector. Then, because it was the kit, and I say they were offering some discounts by buying things together, there's a second cable. This one doesn't have the 10K resistor in it. This one is, how best to explain this? In the mid-90s, 94, 95, and before 96. In 1996, OBD2 became a requirement. And many of the companies, GM included, started introducing cars in the OBD1 world that actually had some of the early OBD2 software in them. They weren't certified to OBD2, but they worked similar to OBD2 because the engineers had to test the software. And I was in the industry in those days, and I know the engine teams were working very hard because you had really complex new diagnostics and you wanted to test them. So for example, my daughter had a 95 Buick Regal with a 3800, and that was one of those crossover cars. So you couldn't jumper it with a paperclip and read flashing codes anymore. All the codes that came up were OBD2 type codes. And many of the diagnostics wouldn't set a check engine light. They had diagnostics running that wouldn't give you a code, but if you plugged in the right tool, you could see what was going on. So those cars, that's what this cable is for. Those cars had an OBD2 connector on them, but actually ran OBD1 diagnostics. So in this kit, one of the features of this kit was they give you the same USB to an OBD2 connector that will talk to the OBD1 software. Sounds complicated, but this is like to cover those cars that are in between. Then thirdly, because I wanted to do OBD2, they've got one here called an all-in-one scan tool. It has an OBD2 cable that goes to a serial type connector that goes into this adapter. The other side of this adapter is USB, and it's a USB cable that goes from here into the computer. So when I get to do an OBD2, I'm not going to mess with this one today. Just telling you what's in the kit. These two connectors and this adapter should let me get in and talk to the OBD2 system. Now, I don't expect I'm going to get all the manufacturer's codes and so forth. It'll probably only get me the generics. That's for another day. But because I kind of wanted to do that in the future, it was like I'd buy this kit, and it was a substantial discount to buy everything at once and not have to go back and buy and pay for shipping and everything for 3 different sets. So that's kind of my intro. My goal will be take the OBD1 cable. My laptop's over here. I'm going to switch over in a moment and try to get some software loaded up. And then I'm going to go out on the Camaro and plug it in, go out in the garage and see what we can do. Okay, well, I'm ready to get started. When you buy the kit, the ALDL folks, OBD folks that provide the kit, give you some nice instruction sheets. So I'm going to follow the instruction sheets, and this is for the regular ALDL 12-pin cable. It says boot up your PC. Well, I've got it. Plug in the CD-ROM. Well, I've got it on a memory stick. Then plug in the cable, and then Windows should detect the device and install the drivers. So let's give it a start. I'll put that drive in over there, and I'll plug in the OBD1 cable is now plugged in. Well, I didn't get any messages that it was installing, so let's see what it says. It says there's a USB drivers directory right here. CDM. Okay, there are drivers for Linux, Mac and Windows. I got Windows 10, so which looks like it's in here. Looks like it works either way. So there's the setup programs, and it's in here again. 2077, 2077. I'll just open that one up. So tell it yes. There's the license agreement. I always look at these license agreements to make sure they're sane. Normally you're going to say yes, or you can't use the tool, but looks like kind of the standard things. It's really cautioning you that the drivers need to be used with the drivers are made to be used with a particular chip. That chip should be in this cable, and you don't want to use it with other chips because you might cause problems. There's no warranty, law jurisdiction, okay. The device driver installation wizard did not update any of your software for your hardware because it was not better than the software you already have installed. So I guess it was already there. Okay, well that's good. Then I can close that. Open up Device Manager here and look under the Common LPT section. Okay, and it says FTDI, which is what that's the converter hardware, is on port COM5. Okay, well that looks good. Alright, so I'll have to remember COM5. Alright, then I've got, when I get to this page, it's got shell run. I think that's the one I probably want to use. Let's see what it'll give me here. There we go. I have ALDL, OBD1, USB. I've already got the drivers, the diagnostic software. From what I have seen before, I would like to do WINALDL. There may be some other ones in here that would be useful, but I understand that WINALDL works with would work with my car, so I'm going to try this. Do an installation here. There may be some others that would work as well. Now, this software you do need, it needs to be supported. The software that you use needs to know what ECM you have and what its internal calibrations and setups are, so that it knows how to do things. And so WINALDL, it looks like, there's a whole list of vehicles that are supported here. I'm just going to go down my list. There's here we go. For me, 1985, 5-liter V8, port fuel injected LB9 VNF. So it's in here. So now I have that installed. Okay, well there's a lot of instructions here, and I'll kind of scan through these, and then I'm going to go out to the car and we'll connect that up and see how it works. Well, I have WINALDL loaded up. It's this box right here. The only thing I had to do special was I had gone into Device Manager and looked up the COM port, and it defaults to COM1, so I had to go over here and make it COM5, and that made it happy from there. Alright, well, I'm supposed to do is set up the configuration here, and what it says is, because I have gotta get the right one here. I have a 1985 5-liter, so it should be 122, 6870. I gotta pick the right configuration or it doesn't know what to do. So I want 6870. Right there, 122, 6870. Let's exit out of that. I'm going to exit out completely for a minute here to make sure it loads up properly. Now let's see what we got. It says I'm at 6870. Turn this guy on. See if I get some sensor data out of it. I'm still not getting anything. Even with the I realize I got shut off, but it's powered up. Let's try starting it back. Okay, well, at this stage, I stopped and I went offline, turned off the camera, and just started working on alternatives. And mostly I went to the COM port in Device Manager and looked at all the advanced settings and tried to change almost every combination that I could find. Secondly, then, one of my theories was this is a 160 baud controller, which is relatively slow. And so I was trying to slow down the data rates in the COM port to see if maybe that would help. And it didn't. I just kept changing things until I did find something eventually that works, and came back, and I'll show you that here in just a moment. So I'm back working on the WINALDL and my OBD1 cable, but I figured out what the problem was and why I couldn't get WINALDL to read the signals in my 85 Camaro with my tuned port 305. So I'm going to show you what it took to make it work. Now, right now I have the cable plugged into my side port on my laptop. Everything's installed, the drivers are installed, I showed that before. You want to do is go down to Windows System and Control Panel. There are other ways to get there, but you want Device Manager. Then you want to go down Device Manager to the ports. And first of all, this is just this is the USB serial port, and it installed itself on COM5, which is fine. That's a USB serial converter. I'll back out of that for a second and go down further, because down here toward the bottom there are universal serial bus controllers. And if you go down that list, you'll go down to this one that says USB serial converter. And I may have showed this before, but I'm just going to go back through again. and you go to the Advanced tab and make sure that this Load VCP is turned on. That's the main thing, is make sure that checkbox is there. And other than that, that's all. I turned off allow this to bring the computer out of standby just so that power management doesn't accidentally get in the way for some reason. But that's fine. So you say that's okay. And if this Advanced tab doesn't show up, unplug the USB and plug it back into your port a second time. And I've had that, I've been able to get the tab to come up. Sometimes if you've had the computer shut off or sleeping or walked away, sometimes it won't show up. So anyway, USB serial converter, make sure it says VCP, which I believe is virtual COM port, which is what you're doing. But mine did that on its own, but you need to make sure. Second thing is then go back to the USB serial port COM5, that's what I'm plugged into, and your computer may vary, but and I went back to Advanced, and it says serial enumerator, that's checked. Actually, what I'm going to do is just hit the defaults. And set it to 4096. And then this one was 9600, so I'm going to set it back to, I'm going to just leave it alone for now. So I've got this one set back to defaults. Then what I found the challenge that I had was if I go back to WINALDL and open that one up, in the configuration box, this one by default was 2400. All I did was click that to 48. Now, considering that this is called a 160 baud controller, I wouldn't have thought we'd have needed a higher speed, but for some reason it needed that. So here I am on mine, the ECM types of 122, 68, 70. It loads everything else. I had to set COM5 to match what COM port I was using over in the device manager. And I set this to 4800. Hit exit, and then the program was up and ran. So once I got that configuration set, then things started working again, and everything started to populate. So I'm going to go out to the garage and plug it in, and we'll see if we can get a data signal this time. So here I am, I've got it keyed up, and I'm working fine. It's pulling full sets of data all the way down. Granted, the engine is off, so different parameters are not showing. But if I go over here to sensor data, my whole list of sensor data is here now. And a couple things I've noted in the past when I've been talking about scan tools is that certain things displayed on the scan tool don't seem accurate. Well, there are obviously some conversion factors in here. And so here's mass airflow is 991, and I had a conversion. Well, when it internally is showing the conversion here, it takes you to 3.87 grams per second. The other one that was very interesting to me was my coolant temperature didn't ever read correctly. Well, it's showing 69, which is high. It's not that warm in here. It converts to 53.2, which is about right, actually. And here's the manifold absolute manifold air temperature. Raw is 43 and converted is 58. So 53 and 58 are, pretty close. In fact, the air is probably that warm. I've had an electric heater running out here, but the block is probably not warmed up that much. So you kind of have to watch out for different counts. And I'm going to tell you before I start the engine is that I have been tinkering with this, and I have to run with either the 10K on or the alternate, I forget what they call it, the alternate mode. But there are all my flags. And what it's doing is showing diagnostic mode, or ALDL mode at 10K. That's what's plugged in. If I flip this over to the other one, come on, doing this jumper, that jumper's kind of small. There it goes. You can hear the fan take off, and that goes into what they call the diagnostic mode at 0 ohms, and it shows a different set of data, and so now I'm back to 10K. But certain things switch. See, like IAC is 145, and when you switch modes, IAC goes to 0, so it pushes it the other way. Alright, so now I've got it running in 10K mode, and there's IAC's running a little over 100, and it's coming down as the engine's only been running for a couple minutes, but it's dropping as the engine starts to warm up. And you can see mass airflow, pulse width, all looking pretty good. But now everything's counting, and I have WINALDL set up in normal mode for Windows 10. No compatibility modes. I had tried using a compatibility mode, and it wasn't helping, so I took that back. All my stuff is defaults in Device Manager for the serial port, and it's working just fine. But if I take off the 10K thing, it settles right down, but the data goes away. It just can't manage that. So we'll put her back into 10K mode here, and things come up. Let's see if we can get it to nope, there the flags just flipped to closed loop. It says BLM is enabled. These tables aren't populating yet. That's an interesting, more for me to learn. But now I at least have it operating, and I have sensor data. No error codes. I wasn't getting in this block learn table. It was set on narrow. So I set it to wide. Okay, now I'm starting to get things that are starting to populate. What about on this one? So that was block learn. This one's INT. Okay. O2 sensor. What happens if I go narrow? So narrow doesn't compute, but wide does. All right. Alright, so I'm getting responses in all the tables. It'll take me a little time. I'm going to have to do a little, there's a data logger here where I could have it collect various codes or various data sets for me and put it to a file. And I'll have to tinker with that. I'll say that, move this over a little bit, there are parameters up here for narrow and wide, and there are defaults for what those are. And again, may need to learn and experiment with what ranges are required to make things populate correctly. But for now, WINALDL is working, and I'll have to go back and try the Tuner Pro, and now let's go ahead and exit this one, and that's all for today.